Hey guys, how you doing? This is Karri, the author of Panzer Hearts. Today we're gonna talk about the alternate history of Panzer Hearts. There's also a hidden lore section in the game, so be sure to check that out. The world of Panzer Hearts is a mix between ancient Egyptian and totalitarian Germany. You might wonder why these cultures mix in the first place. Well, understanding this requires the study of alternate history. The way to study alternate history is to take something from the actual history, change it, and then see how it affects the new world that we just created. In order to arrive into a scenario where Egyptian culture is deeply rooted into German society, many things need to change. But one thing in particular, and that is the Late Bronze Age collapse. The Late Bronze Age collapse was a great disruption in the ancient world. It took only about 50 years in between 1200 to 1150 BC for many empires and kingdoms to fall in the Eastern Mediterranean area. And these were like 2,000-year-old empires. These included the Mycenaeans, the Minoans, the Hittite Empire, and a bit later on the Kingdom of Egypt. The Late Bronze Age collapse led to dark years of poverty and much less sophisticated societies, which would last all the way up until about 9th century BC, when the Classical period started. And what happened in the Classical period? The Classical Greek culture. As the Classical Greek culture is widely considered to be the cradle of Western culture, then if an alternate history timeline can be built where ancient Egypt survives into the Classical Age and in the geographical area of Greece, then it can be argued that the Egyptian culture would have a huge impact on the Western world, just as the Greek culture did. Let's look at the map of the actual world of that time. The Late Bronze Age world was globalized, meaning the kingdoms and empires were interconnected. In the Aegean and Eastern Mediterranean, there were a number of flourishing separate civilizations: Mycenaeans, Minoans, Hittite, Egyptians, Babylonians, Assyrians, Canaanites, and Cypriots. They were independent but consistently interacted with each other. Let's look at the map of our counterfactual world. As you can see, there's an isthmus connecting Egypt straight to what we know as Greece in our actual world. This is the only thing we changed. Everything else will follow from this. Let's look at how the Late Bronze Age collapse came to be and how this geographical alteration can create a world where the collapse does not happen. According to archaeology and history, there are many reasons for the Late Bronze Age collapse. Let's look at those now. To begin, let's look at environmental factors. First, there was a 300-year-long dry period from 12th to 9th century BC. Cyprus, North Syria including Levant and Gipala, Sea of Galilee and Dead Sea all suffered from this. As in our counterfactual world there is an isthmus connecting Egypt to the European mainland, it is logical that the Nile stretches further up north as it needs to find a place where to flow into the sea. And why is this important? The thing about Nile is that it floods very predictably. This flooding created the wealth of Egypt, as it was easy to irrigate and have large crop yields often. And not only the irrigation, but the flooding Nile also brought in nutrients and minerals to keep the soil fertile over an extended period of sustained agriculture. This meant Egypt had a continuous surplus of grain, and then they could sell it in this interconnected globalized world and buy everything else they needed. The drought didn't touch the real world Egypt, but as the world was so connected a system, a drought somewhere caused problem everywhere. Second, there's famine. Anatolia, Ugarit and much of Levant suffered from this. As the societies were based on agriculture, it is easy to argue that the famine was caused by the drought. If we get rid of the drought, the problem with famine goes away too. 3. Helka 3 volcano erupting in Iceland. The eruption took place approximately year 1000 BC and it cooled the temperature in the northern hemisphere for 18 years. This could have played a role in the Late Bronze Age collapse. Our geographical alteration offers us a solution. The tectonic plates are different and therefore the eruption never took place. We'll take a closer look in the tectonic plates in a little bit. And fourth, we have something really groundbreaking. Earthquake storms in Greece, Anatolia and Levant. Earthquake storm means there's an earthquake, but it doesn't completely release the stress in the fault line. It is followed by another earthquake and another one. An earthquake storm can last up to 60 years. If the Mediterranean lies on top of fault lines, Take a look at the list of major cities destroyed during the Late Bronze Age collapse. Then take a look at the map of recorded earthquakes in between 1900 to 1980. As you can see, the maps correspond quite well. This shows that this is an area prone to have plenty of earthquakes. Tectonic earthquakes are caused by tectonic plates smashing into each other. Fault lines show where the energy of the jammed tectonic plates is released. Look at the map of fault lines of our actual world. As you can see, the fault lines are exactly where the earthquakes happen. In the world of Panzer Hearts, the fault lines are different because the tectonic plates are different. Because of this, these earthquakes and earthquake storms never took place. Okay, we're done with the environmental factors. Let's continue with sea peoples. The mysterious sea peoples have been one of the favorite explanations of the Late Bronze Age collapse. It makes sense, as it is convenient to blame some unknown bad guys for something that is hard to explain. Here's an inscription from the north wall of Medinet Habu temple. Egyptian king Ramesses III describes the aggressive sea peoples attacking Egypt. The foreign countries made a conspiracy in their islands. All at once the lands were removed and scattered in the fray. No land could stand before their arms. From Hatti, Quod, Karkemish, Arjava and Alashia on, being cut off one at a time. A camp was set up in Amurru. They desolated its people, and its land was like that which has never come into being. They were coming forward toward Egypt, while the flame was prepared before them. Their confederation was the Peleset, Cheker, Shekelesh, Denien and Veshesh, lands united. They laid their hands upon the land as far as the circuit of the earth, their hearts confident and trusting. Our plans will succeed. Egypt was the only civilization in the Late Bronze Age that could withstand the attacks of the sea peoples. So fierce they were. It is not clear who the sea peoples were, but it seems they were a collection of different people, most likely from the Mediterranean area itself, that were resettling, as they had ox-drawn carriages and their wives with them. Sea peoples would never have come to be, at least not in such great force, should the overall conditions have been better. And then we can look back at the environmental factors we considered earlier and conclude that neutralizing them would also neutralize the need for sea peoples to rampage around. Thirdly, we look at trade disruptions. As mentioned earlier, the Late Bronze Age civilizations were a globalized community, meaning they were connected to each other closely. One way to describe the Eastern Mediterranean world of that time is that each civilization is like a gear in a machine. If one gear fails, the whole machine breaks down. Therefore, problems with trade would cause big problems on a larger scale. In order to understand the Bronze Age economics, we need to understand the composition of the most important material of that time, and that is of course bronze. You need two ingredients to make bronze. Those are copper and tin. The only source of copper in the Near East was in Cyprus, controlled by the Hittite Empire. Tin was even rare, as it didn't exist in large quantities at all in the Near East. In other words, Egypt, among all the other civilizations, needed to trade in order to get their hands on the precious copper and tin to make bronze that formed the backbone of their military might. The tectonic plate argument will solve this problem too. As the geographical constitution of the Earth is different, the lands of the world of Panzer Hearts, Egypt, might well have both copper and tin. This would solve the problem of desperately needing to trade in order to get these raw materials. In other words, Egypt would be more self-sufficient. This doesn't, however, remove the fact that trade is still a must in this interconnected world of the Late Bronze Age. But now Egypt has both weapons and food, so it could stay at least stable enough to survive the collapse. As fourth and final reason for the Late Bronze Age collapse, I present you the idea of system collapse. This line of reasoning makes a lot more sense to me than any one single factor causing 2 millennia-old civilizations to fall in mere 50 years. In order to constitute a system collapse, we basically take all the things aforementioned and put them together. Let's remember the civilizations are like gears in a machine. If one breaks, the whole machine breaks. But also a single developed Late Bronze Age civilization is like a machine itself with many turning gears. The Egyptian civilization was highly complex and specialized. There were farmers, professional military, priests, high nobility, the pharaoh, and maybe most importantly, the scribes. The scribes were the only ones who could write and read. Not even the kings could often do that. Let's look at the drought once again. When a drought hits, it first affects the amount of food available. This will lead to people migrating to somewhere else with more fertile lands, creating the sea peoples. When there is not enough food, the society cannot support the specialized classes anymore, for example the soldiers and the scribes. Without a proper army, the dissident citizens will overthrow the government. And without scribes, language is fast forgotten, and ta-da! You have a dark age. General features of a system collapse as described by Colin Renfrew. 1. Collapse of the central administrative organization. 2. Disappearance of the traditional elite class. 3. Collapse of the centralized economy. And 4. Settlement shifts and population decline. If all the aspects constituting system collapse are lessened or even removed, we can well argue that Egypt could have avoided the late Bronze Age collapse also on the system scale and live on to spread its culture into Europe. Geography plays a very significant role in historical development. As Ian Morris put it, geography determines social development, but on the other hand, social development determines what geography means. By changing the geography of the Eastern Mediterranean, I have created a world where the late Bronze Age collapse does not happen, or at least it's mild enough for Egypt to survive into the classical era. If you guys get interested, there's a list of further readings in the video description. So what do you guys think? Have I created a plausible alternate world? Please don't hesitate to comment below. And don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel and like us on Facebook. This has been Karri, the author of Panzer Hearts visual novel. See you guys soon again!
Panzer Hearts. Build the tanks, date the girls, choose your side.